All right, welcome to the video. So today I thought we'll do a tier list on the perks within the Thronefall game because I have been enjoying this game so much. And if you watched my recent video of me doing the challenge of all mutators on the Nordfels map, then check the link in the description for that. That was a super fun challenge that I gave myself. But as I say, on here we've got the tier list. We're going to go through just the perks today. So whoever had put this on the tier list site, big shout out, because that would have saved me a lot of time. So thanks for whoever that was. So without further ado, let's run through the perks of my experience so far. I have used all of them at least once, but I have obviously more experience with others, and there will be a bit more of a bias towards the full mutation Nordfels map that we did, because there were just some perks that just outshined others massively. And luckily for anyone that's new or just started playing this game, they're actually some of the earlier perks, which is always appreciated. So let's get into it and let's go through. So the first perk that we have, and I've also got the game open in the background, is Royal Mint. And Royal Mint says that your castle center produces 1, 2 or 3 additional gold per day depending on its level, and you start the game with an extra gold. Now this is absolutely S tier. It's great at the beginning, just gives you extra gold. As long as you prioritize your town hall when you can, then this is gonna really help you and just give you like an extra buff of gold. Now in the full mutations challenge that we did in Nordfell, this was without a doubt one of the best perks to have. Like, I couldn't find a way to do it without this, just because when you're using one of the mutators called Challenge of the Snake God, that reduces the amount that enemies drop by 50%, and you'll be surprised how much that totals up over a match. So this perk was absolutely incredible. The next perk that we've got here is the Arcane Towers. So all of your towers have a 33% range, and their projectiles deal 33% more damage to enemies. Now, this is actually a really good perk. I use this on the kind of desert map, which is the one after the Nordfels one, and this was actually really good. So it wasn't good for the full mutations. I couldn't really fit it in because you can only have up to 3 perks when you hit a certain level, but it is still a really good perk. It helps the towers, it makes them a bit more tankier, yeah, no, it's definitely useful if you're not doing a full mutations challenge. And again, I can't speak for the other maps. I am currently testing those as we speak to see whether there are other perks that come into play on different maps when you do full mutations, but so I may revisit this tier list, but at the moment I think it sits in a solid A. All right, next up then we've got is the heavy armor. So you have a massive 350% more health, but your horse is 20% slower at night. Now, when you first look at this perk, you might actually think, well, why would I want loads of health when it's all about keeping the town hall alive and infantry and stuff? And also, why would I want to be slower? Now, maybe for the bigger maps, this may be a detriment to you to have this. However, in the full mutations play that I did, this was incredible because it pairs really nicely. And again, it's not something that we'll talk to today, but it really pairs nicely with something called magic armor. So magic armor is an upgrade that you get, I believe, on the first town hall upgrade when you've unlocked it. And what it does is that when the enemies hit you, they then reflect damage back. Now, that sounds quite cool on its own, but another buff that it actually gives you that may or may not be intended, we don't know, is that when the enemies hit you, they are also aggroed by you. So when you do a full mutations challenge, one of the mutations is that the challenge of the Falcon God. So enemies are 75% faster and chase you for 60% shorter. So that means that if you didn't have magic armor and you hit them, it'd be really hard to kind of keep a huge group of enemies kind of aggroed onto you. Apart from archers, for some reason archers seem to specifically target you unless you've got infantry around. So this was incredible, an incredible synergy with the heavy armor, because you've got so much health and now you can deflect even more damage back to enemies and you can aggro them as well. So it's just, without a doubt, it's S, no doubt in my mind. Next one is the castle fortifications. So your castle center has 150% health, and the intervals between its attacks is reduced by 67%. and its attack range is increased by 50%. This is godly. And for the mutations, all mutations challenge, actually, these first 3 perks were used. Now, again, I did mention at the start of the video that it's very likely that I would have a bias towards that. And let's be honest, that is one of the hardest challenges that you can obviously do on any map, which is put all the mutations on and try and beat it. So, but even without all the mutations, you know, without a doubt, and definitely at the start of your game, you know, taking Royal Min and Castle Fortifications is just gonna make your runs so much easier. And that was so true when we were doing the full mutation. So this just makes your Town Hall really, really tanky, and it makes it do a lot of damage. If you don't have it, you really, really notice it. So every time I kind of pulled this perk away and then I played, I really, really noticed it. And yeah, it was just, yeah, by far one of the best perks. Definitely recommend it. It's nice that you can get it really early, which is great. Ring of Resurrection. So the first time you die each night, you're revived immediately, and all of your dead units are revived by you. So I've used this a couple of times. Haven't found any use for it for a full mutations run just yet. Haven't managed to fit it in. However, if you are running mass infantry, which on the last map, the snow map, I found that I had a lot of infantry, this perk could prove to be fairly useful if all of your troops are dying. And the reason why this might be good is that you can pick another perk later on that we will be looking at, which increases the amount of health that your troops have, but it also increases the amount of spawn time that is there for them. So you could have a huge group of men and archers and that with you, they all die, you purposely get killed, and then you just all resurrect at once, and then that could make this perk quite useful. But I just think on its own, without synergy, without thought, and sort of playing around it, it's very, very situational, and so unfortunately it does go into the C tier for me. Next up then we've got is the Commander mode. So all of your units and buildings deal 45% damage to enemies, but your own damage is 60% less effective. Now, I actually am going to put this one in A tier because this is actually really good if you're playing a sort of a strategy where all of your focus is around either all your infantry or all your towers, and so you're not really the primary defense. You're sort of, you can do a little bit of distraction. You know, you can absolutely go with the light spear weapon, but you really are very much reliant on all of your team doing all of the work. And I think, you know, that's not an issue at all. You know, you can play with that strategy. Not been able to find any use for it for a full mutations run, but definitely a solid perk if you want to focus more on your troops and your towers and your castle being the main defense force, if you like. Okay, next up is then Architect's Council. So build options for the next castle center upgrade are already unlocked, and this means you have more build options to choose from early in the game. So again, couldn't find a way to fit this into a full mutations. However, this perk is actually really, really strong because what it allows you to do is kind of expand out on a map almost immediately. So it allows you to kind of get any extra towers and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily get until you upgrade your town hall twice. So in certain situations, I have absolutely found this perk quite useful actually. However, obviously it becomes immediately redundant the second that you upgrade your town hall once, because it's giving you another one. So in theory, when you upgrade to town hall 3, you're literally just doing it for the perk and then the added bonus to your town hall, and then this perk isn't really doing anything. So it is still really strong, which is why I'm going to put it in A, but it will definitely be at the bottom of A tier. And I think anything else that I feel is A tier will be above it, but it is still really strong perk. All right, next up then is the warrior mode. So this is when you have a weapon equipped, it becomes more powerful every night, all the way up to 160%, but all of your units and buildings deal minus 40%. I think that the way that the maps are designed at the moment it's not, you can't do it with just you, and especially when you add a few mutations on. So even, you know, no matter what weapon you go with, when you get to the later rounds, you just do not have that much of an impact. So admittedly, you know, it says it goes up to 160%. Not all of the maps go up to 16 waves. So, you know, for example, I think Nordfels maybe goes up to like 12, 13 off the top of my head. Maybe it's like 11, I can't remember. But you wouldn't, I assume you wouldn't get the top 106%, right? Because my assumption is that when you activate the perk, you start off with an extra 10%. And then each round after that, it increases by however it is in the rounds. If it's that it's 160% divided by the lower rounds, say in like Nordfels or whatever, then you're getting like 12, 13% maybe around. But even so, it would kind of be useful at the start, and then like later on, just to have minus 40% from all of your units and buildings is just putting you at a massive disadvantage, because it's not just a flat 40%. The way I look at it is, okay, if I've got 2 towers that are next to each other and they're both doing 40% less, that's almost like 80% less. And then you've got 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 towers, and then you've got your town hall, and then you've got all your infantry and that. So it's just a huge amount of damage reduction there, and it's putting a huge amount of onus on you as the player to do all the damage. Now, it's not to say that you couldn't synergize it with other perks that increase your unit's health, and then on top of that, you could have where, you know, they've got loads and loads of health, you're doing lots of damage, you synergize other perks that make you do lots of damage, and so your units are kind of stalling the fight, but you're the one that's doing the main damage. I could absolutely see a scenario where that comes into play. Can't really see it right now being a big factor in a full mutations run, but absolutely, you know, you could synergize around it. But I think we have to kind of sort of look at perks on their own as well as a synergy as well, right? So I just think on its own, it's not a great perk, and then if you synergize it, it could become, say, a good perk. All right, next up then is we've got the castle blueprint. So walls and towers have 100% more health. This is really, really good. Solid perk. Again, just not able to fit it into a full mutations at the moment. The top 3 that we've got currently in the S just absolutely take precedent over anything else, and they just made the run so much easier. Again, I am still going to keep trying different stuff, so, you know, that may change my tier list, but for now, unfortunately, I can't put castle blueprint any higher than A. But it is a solid perk and really good for when you're doing a sort of a lower run. Definitely can be very useful there. So yeah, good perk, extra health for both walls and towers. What is there not to like? All right, next up is Gladiator School. So units are trained 75% faster, but every barracks and each of their upgrades cost 1% gold, plus 1 gold, sorry. So Gladiator School is good. The fact that you can have units come out much quicker is very, very useful. Not found it useful for full mutations perk, unfortunately, just because you just need some sort of gold buff at the beginning, just because of the minus 50% that you get from the challenge of the snake god. So you're not really, it's very difficult to try and, you know, fit a perk like this in for a normal run. For one of the bigger maps like the desert map and the ice map, this can actually be quite useful. I did actually use it when I cleared the snow map, so for that reason it is still a good perk. You could build around it, and it could also be used. There's another perk later on that kind of increases, I think it's health, but which we'll get to, but it obviously sort of increases the amount of time it takes to train units. This perk can kind of negate the negative effect of that, but the increase in gold for this is noticeable. So if you haven't got a really good gold strategy, then you will notice the increase. There'll be like these times when you just have 4 gold ready for the next wave and you can't now buy the barracks because Gladiator School is making it cost more, which can be quite impactful on a run. So that's why I can't place it any higher than B. All right, next up is Warhorse then. So your horse is 20% faster and riding over enemies deals 2.5 damage. This damage increases in correlation to all of your other in-game weapon upgrades like certain castle center upgrades. So again, Warhorse can be kind of useful. It's one of those perks where you really have to go out of your way to get the full benefit out of it. Can pair quite well with the magic armor upgrade that you can get from the town hall, So as you're sort of trampling over units, they're then being aggroed by you and you're doing extra damage. That can actually be quite useful. But I just think with, you know, with a limited pool of free perks and only 1 and 2 in your earlier games, you wouldn't really pick Warhorse, I don't think, over anything too much above it. And they're only really going to be the last 2 maps, I'd say, where you're going to get enough benefit to keep constantly trampling over enemies to sort of get use out of this. But if you don't, you know, if you had full mutations and you don't have other perks to keep you alive, so like the extra health from heavy armor and stuff like that, you're just going to insta-die, and you're not really going to get any benefit out of it. So that's why I can't place that one any higher than C. All right, next up is Glass Cannon then. So you deal 100% more damage, but you have minus 8% health. So this is actually a pretty good perk if you decide to go down the archer route, so the bow and dagger route, and you take all damage upgrades from the town hall, and then you sort of have your units in the front taking all of the brunt, but you're in the back just sniping really hard and staying at distance. Then glass cannon can be really, really good. You could potentially pair it with the spear, but then you would need the health to kind of back it up as well, because otherwise, if your health just goes too quickly, you're not going to be able to activate your ability in time, and that will happen more than you think. So yeah, if you're using an archer build, I have used glass cannon. It's actually quite powerful. If you get the right upgrades, you'll find that with the bow, you'll just start one-shotting a lot of the units, which is, again, really, really impactful and can make the run so much easier. So do like glass cannon, but again, not been able to fit it into a full mutations run yet, so don't think you can really go any higher than B, and I definitely don't think it's any better than anything in A or S. Alright, next up then is Big Harbours. So Big Harbours is Harbours have capacity for 2 additional fishing boats and have 100% more health and spawn with 1 boat on the water. So this one's really good, but only for the snow map. So it's a perk that is specifically designed for the snow map only, and so if you still count the first map, you can't use it on any of the other maps, which kind of just makes it, you know, it makes it difficult to place it really any higher than C. So I would have liked to have seen that this had some sort of extra, you know, some sort of universal benefit rather than being specific. Obviously there are other perks that we'll get to that are specific to farms, and they are specific to the mines, so it's not like they've just done it for Harbours and forgot about everything else. But because this perk is so niche, that and maybe that's by design, that's what they want, it's not very good on any other map, but on, you know, the actual snow map, it is good, and it adds up a lot, and Harbours are quite useful. So you know, you will be prioritizing those in most matches. I'm still yet to obviously do a full mutations run on it, so I will be testing this perk out. So, you know, the stock in this perk may go up or down depending on whether I can kind of beat the snow map with this on, say, maybe, rather than you know, using the perk which is Royal Mint. So we'll just have to see on that one. All right, so next up then is Elite Warriors. So all of your units have 100% health, but their training speed at night is reduced by 6%. So this is the one where I was saying that if you kind of pair it with Gladiator School, that increases your units their speed. It kind of negates that, and because it's only a minus 60%, in theory you're left with a positive of 15%, which is actually quite useful. And all of your units having extra health is extremely good. So, but I don't think it in a normal run, it's an A tier without a doubt. Can't find a place for it at the moment in a full mutations run, but it is still really good. But again, to make it really, really good, you have to pair it with Gladiator School, which kind of then means that you're using 2 perk slots essentially to make 1 perk really good. I think minus 60% training speed's quite harsh. So, you you know, if it was me, I'd maybe adjust figures a little bit there, maybe, you know, adjust the health accordingly. On the big maps where troops are running, so for example, like on the desert map, you've got 2 barracks sort of to the bottom left of where you spawn, and then sometimes you'll have attacks that are like right at the top. When those units obviously die if you're defending at the top, then admittedly there is obviously a long delay, but because there's so far to travel, that negative -6% may not make that much of an impact. So by the time the units, say, get to one of your walls, you've then finally got units that are being respawned. But as I say, -60% is incredibly harsh. But if your units are able to obviously survive an onslaught, then the -6% is not actually that bad. So, but again, the 100% health on all units once you start amassing lots of troops is, you know, amazing. They just last for so long. And if you pair that with, you know, healing towers and stuff like that, then Elite Warriors is really good. So I think it does deserve a spot on A. You just have to, again, you have to work around it quite a bit to really get the maximum benefit from it. All right, next up is Archery. I think that's, I'm not even sure what that's saying actually. Archery refills? Refills? Oh, I've butchered that. Maybe I'm having a mare. But anyway, all your archers have a 60% more range and their movement speed is increased by 20%. This is actually quite good. Big fan of this one. In the sense that, because you can kind of keep your archers more centralized. So for like Nordfels and even the ice map as well, because your archers can fire a lot further, you can kind of keep them a bit more central to your base of operations, if you like, the town hall, and they don't have to move too far. And obviously having the increased speed's really good as well. So if they need to get, you know, re-aggroed to other units coming from somewhere else, that can be quite useful. So I actually do like this one, and you're always going to build some sort of archers in a match. So I do think that the extra range, it's a shame it doesn't do a little bit of extra damage. But if you've unlocked the fire archers, and again, if you've watched any of my previous videos linked below, you'll know that I'm a big advocate for the fire archers. So the extra range on those is incredible. And you know, when you pair that with this, you really will notice the difference. So for that, I think it's a good solid B tier perk. All right, next up is blacksmith upgrades start with 1 day of progress already complete, so all upgrades finish much faster. All blacksmith upgrades cost -1 gold. I have a bit of a mixed feeling around this one, because I do kind of like this, but it literally is only on the last map, and I don't think there's any reason to not have the blacksmith on the other maps. So it is a bit strange to me that something that could be quite universal is kind of sectioned off till only the last map. But regardless of that, as a perk on its own, I mean, an extra day will help. So, you know, if you're trying to prioritize all of the blacksmith upgrades that are available in the given time frame, so the given rounds, can be quite challenging. So I think when I completed my run, I don't think I even used the blacksmith, just because trying to prioritize it and the additional gold that it cost was quite challenging. But, you know, some of the upgrades that you do get in it are really good. So, you know, having it cost less gold and take less days on that map is going to be, it can be quite useful. So I will be planning on trying to use this potentially. I can't see it fitting in a full mutations run at all. And because it's so specific to that map, it's not like with like the harbours and the farms and stuff like that, albeit, you know, farms are actually on every map, but it's not like, you know, it's something that feels like it could be universal, and I'm not really too sure if you have a perk like that for each map, what they are specifically. So, you know, if they include that on every single map, then I think this research would come up at least a tier, maybe 2, depending on the upgrades and how impactful it was on each map. But given it's only one map, and you really have to go out where you prioritize it, I don't think it's any higher than C. But I think it's probably better than, yeah, I think it's probably better than these perks, but not any higher than C. All right, next up then is Fortified Houses. Houses have 250% more health, and level 2 houses shoot arrows at enemies, dealing 8 damage to enemies nearby. Now, so just to give you a bit of a story around this one, before I learned about magic armor, being able to kind of aggro the flying units in the Nordfels map, and I think it's like wave 5 or 6, I thought, okay, I'm having trouble with the flying units because I'm having to focus so much on houses and building up economy and stuff. Maybe I'll use fortified houses, which will allow them to attack back and obviously give them loads more health. And what I found was that the range on this is so short that the units have to be attacking that house in order for it to do anything. So if like you've got a swarm of the units that are around a house, then it's just going to get overwhelmed. You know, even if it's like 3-4, the extra health buff is just not going to keep it alive. And because if like there are units that are at, say, like a neighboring house or at your town hall, because they're not directly on this house, it doesn't do anything. Like it just, they don't attack. So I think at the moment that this perk is a solid D. I actually think it's, you know, even worse than warrior mode. I haven't found a use case for this even in a non-mutations game. So I think in order for this to be substantially useful, it needs to have a range buff by like massively, because the damage isn't really even that high anyway. So you know, and to be honest, most of your houses are around your town hall. So if you're at the point where the units have completely swamped your town hall, this is not going to save you, because they're just going to run through the houses really quickly, and again, because of the short range, they're just not really going to attack that much. So definitely needs a buff, that perk. I like the idea of it. I think the concept's cool. I would quite like it to have a bit of a money buff. I know that you can get houses can upgrade every night after you do the upgrade on the town hall, but on the first upgrade town hall, but because I know how useful magic armor is, there's no way I'd ever pick that perk for the town hall and houses now over magic armor. Just magic armor is just way too good. So for that reason, then this perk on its own, not giving any gold buff or range buff or anything really for the houses, it's a shame because I feel there's a good opportunity there, but on its own, yeah, I think it's quite a bad perk. Next up is Pumpkin Fields. So fields have 1 additional gold per day and have 900% more health. They cost +2 more gold to build. Now, this perk I have mixed feelings about, because if you get it up and running on a normal run, I don't ever think it's going to be useful on the mutations. It's too expensive. But on a normal run, I'd put it as A. I'd put it as A because you really notice that additional gold once you start getting it going. But when you're starting out, so if you think about Nordfels, you can, on a normal run, so not a mutation run, on a normal run, you can upgrade to Town Hall, and then you can upgrade a mill and then 2 farms. And sometimes you might even have extra change depending on what other perks you go for. With this, you can literally just get 1 farm, and it's really expensive. And if any of your farms get destroyed, it feels so bad, because you know that the pumpkin fields there is, you know, that you're trying to work around that to really get the benefit out of it. Now, 900% more health sounds really good on paper. Trust me, a few units hitting a farm, it's going to go down. And especially when you're spread out. And because all of the farms typically on all of the maps are away from your main base of operations, you always have to play around the farms. And that's probably the intention, right? Like, they don't want you to just have a farm like in your base, but that you can always kind of nest and guaranteed to get gold, because that may be a bit strong. And I absolutely understand that. But yeah, I think the +2 more gold to build, it feels really harsh. I think maybe +1 would be a little bit better, and then maybe even more health. So I think if you can get it up and running on a normal game, you know, it's a solid B tier. I can't put any higher than that. I'm so close to almost putting it at top C. That's how much I'm not that big of a fan of it. I've tried to work around it. It's difficult to work around. So I think bottom of B tier for now if you can get it up and running, but just be aware of its shortfalls. All right, next up is Healing Spirit. So all healing effects on you and your units are 65% more effective. Again, if you've got Healing Towers and you've decided that you want to go with, say, like Gladiator, to, you know, kind of give your units training faster, and you've gone for Elite Warriors, and you go for the Healing Towers, then this perk is incredible because your units are going to come out quick. They've got tons and tons of health, and then the Healing Tower is going to upgrade them. The problem with it, though, is it takes a long time to get to it, and sometimes it's hard to justify a Healing Tower over a Ballistic Tower, which does extremely high damage to all of the sort of siege units. So I think that if the Healing Tower, because it is just healing, the second a siege tower gets, like a siege catapult gets on it, it will take it out in like 2 hits, sometimes even 1, depending if it's taken any previous damage. So it might be hard to balance. This could become quite OP, this perk, I think, but because it's obviously healing, which is going to be a really strong factor in a game like this. But I do think the tower that you upgrade it with needs significantly more health to really bump this up. And the fact that I think just if it was a perk that you're just throwing in on its own, not really that useful. If you're synergizing it and you're making a build out of it, then it can definitely be a solid B tier perk. But outside of that, yeah, it's not very strong. So that's my thoughts on that one. Next one is the Ice Magic. So slows effects on enemies last 200% longer, and slowed enemies move minus 30% slower. This perk is okay. I think that if I had 4 perks in a full mutations run, I potentially would fit this in, just because if you pair it with Spear, then it can be really, really useful. However, on its own, there's just not that much that really does slow effects. The strongest slow effect is you as holding the light spear. Other than that, there's not that many units that I'm aware of, apart from the spearmen, that really slow. And spearmen suck against archers, whereas knights don't. And knights just take so much more damage. So, you know, if you have any mutation or any higher wave, I just find that the spearmen just die so quick, and that kind of makes this perk redundant. But I would potentially consider it in a full mutations run, just because I could potentially drop something else, knowing that I could slow everything down and maybe, you know, kite around the town hall and the town hall finish off. So I think there's maybe some use case for it, but at the moment, I think just in general, you know, even outside of a full mutations run, it's not that great. All right, next up is melee resistance. So you and your units and all of your buildings start the game with minus 35% resistance against melee. So this perk is actually really, really good. It's solid. I actually think it's a solid top of B tier. It's just a flat perk, like a flat buff that just is always going to help you no matter what. And I really enjoy it. Unfortunately, I did try to use it in the full mutations run, and I've used it in normal run. In normal runs, it's fantastic. Love it. You can slap it on in any build and it will do fine. But it didn't really take precedent over, say, like castle fortifications. So I tried to use it instead of castle fortifications, but you know, with, say, like castle fortifications, it's just giving you so much more. Obviously, yeah, this is a flat buff, which could be quite useful. I think if they ever increase the perk slots to, say, like 4 or 5, and you really get some hard challenges, I actually think this would, you know, you'd have it in there regardless. But at the moment, when you've only got 3 perks, depending on the situation, I think if you're doing normal runs, yeah, you can add it in, it'll be fine. You don't have to necessarily work around it if you don't want to. It's just a flat buff. But I think because it is a perk slot, it's very, very difficult. I actually think that the next one, so we're just going to just skip one for a second, range resistance, which is basically the same, but instead of doing resistance against melee, it does resistance against ranged. I actually think these perks should be combined. and instead just not be 35%, maybe it'll be a little bit less, because 2 perk slots on 2 flat buff resistances at the moment in the current state with only having a 3 perk slot is harsh. It's harsh, especially if you're doing, you know, any sort of high mutations. Just some of the other perks that you can get just give so much value that it's hard to justify picking these over them. But on their own as a buff, yes, you will notice that it is useful. But because they're both separate, it's hard to put them any higher than B. And I think if they were combined and it was a little bit less, I think it'd be a solid A perk without a doubt. All right, next up is Power Tower then. So the tower that you are close to gets significant attack speed boost for 233%. I actually do like this perk. I think it's quite good. The range on it's pretty good. It just seems to be as long as that whatever towers you're close to, it does quite a lot of additional damage. For the bigger maps like the desert map and the ice map, that can be quite useful. But again, it's kind of like situational. So it can be useful, but you kind of almost have to be mindful of it. So like if you really want to get the benefit out of it in like different waves and stuff, you really have to sort of play around it. Again, could be hard to justify this perk above all of the others. You know, yes, with this perk you are giving it a 233% speed boost, which sounds incredible, but is that better than, you know, getting 100% more health to walls and towers? You know, not sure, probably not. So it's like, you know, it can be quite useful. It could definitely help in the earlier waves. Say if you want to go really greedy, but you just want to build one tower and then you're kind of standing near it, defending it, can be quite good. Not found any use for it in a full mutations run though. So, but in a standard run, it could be okay. Wouldn't pick it over anything probably in front of it. I think it's actually probably better than Pumpkin Fields, but I don't think I'd pick anything else. Yeah, everything else above it, I think I'd pick over that without a doubt. All right, next up is then Treasure Hunter. So you get plus 50% extra gold on the morning before the last night. To be honest, this perk, although it sounds great in practice, I actually think it's not that great. Just because the only real last night, well, I mean, obviously the last night in all of them can be quite tough. But this is assuming that you've got all of everything is up, nothing's been destroyed in the round before, because some of the rounds before the final round can actually be quite challenging. So for example, in Nordfels, it's rubbish. You just get a few of these. I think you get like 5 units, almost like a bit of a chill round before you have the final round, which is great. But in the desert map and also the ice map, it's not really like that from my memory. Like the waves aren't quite as chilled. So assuming that you do really well in those, yes, you get lots of extra gold for the final wave. And I think this, you know, if we're just talking about the ice map alone, and if you've done, I won't spoil it, but if you've done that, you'll know what happens at the end. It's quite tough. It's totally different from the other maps. I think that this would be a B tier perk. If you specifically want help with the end of the last wave in the ice map, I think this is a B tier perk. But the fact that it does just absolutely nothing until the very last wave, and it's only 50%, hard to justify it with a free perk limit. I think overall it's a D tier, but you know, I think if the buff was maybe higher, or maybe, you know, there was some sort of other little buff that it gives you, you know, before the morning before the last night, then I think it could be a little bit better. All right, next up is then your mines are indestructible. So I mean, it's all right, like, but to be honest, so this is specific to, I think there's one mine actually I've seen in the ice map, and so you're not really going to use it in there. So this is more around for the desert map specifically, and to be honest, where the mines are placed, there's only really one. So you get 3 mines, one that's kind of in your base, one that's above, and then one that's below. The one that's above doesn't really get targeted. So the one that's kind of like on the cliff face on the desert map, it doesn't really get targeted that much. It's only when you build defense tower next to it and stuff like that, then units kind of really go for it. And then at the bottom, it can be, you know, it could be attacked by stuff. Now, I think where they're going with this is that in the desert map specifically, you get a lot of rounds where they send in these units, these spike ball units that kind of self-destruct, and so with your mines are indestructible, they would just go into those and would never hit your base, which is great, right? Because you've kind of distracted those units and now they're not doing any damage to your overall base, and they kind of, because they're indestructible, they don't, you know, that's kind of maybe the benefit there. Now, I can't remember, I have only used this once, and I can't remember if they still roll into it and blow up or they just ignore it. If they ignore it, this perk's crap. If they go into it and they blow up and it's kind of like a distraction, this perk's great. But remember that, you know, your mines, you kind of typically build them at the start. They diminish each round the amount of gold that they give, and so then this perk becomes more less valuable, because as you get later on and it's only giving you, say, like 1 gold, you don't really care about it anyway. So to use a full perk slot on this is quite hard to justify. And again, because it's so specific to the desert map, it's hard to put it any higher than the top of D tier. And last up is you regenerate health 100%, 20% faster, and the delay before your health regeneration kicks in is reduced by 50%. Now, I have mixed feelings about this, because I feel like this perk should be more of a lifesteal perk, rather than just your health regenerates faster and then the delay before your health generation kicks in. So I think the idea of this perk is you'd go in, you'd attack, you'd take loads and loads of damage, and then as you run away, your health regeneration will kick in, so then you can come back into the fight a lot quicker. But to be honest, this, you know, becomes more useful when you're dealing with, you know, potentially bow and dagger and heavy sword. And spoiler alert, I actually think heavy sword's really bad, but that's a conversation for a different day. So I think that it's, you know, it's not really useful for spear, right? Because when you're in the fight, there's only a couple of instances where you're in the fight, you're taking loads of damage, you do your ability, you come back up to full health, and then you take loads of damage, you have to come away. I think on the desert map that happens quite a bit, but when you use like magic armor and heavy armor and stuff like that, you know, all of the issues that you get with regeneration just become completely redundant, so you wouldn't necessarily pick this perk. So I think that if it was me, I would repurpose this perk to more of a lifesteal perk, just across the board. Maybe, you know, you get more lifesteal, but then your units get a tiny little bit of lifesteal. You know, enough. Again, it's one of those perks where I think you could just really easily overdo it and it could become OP. But I think if you just give a little bit amount, it kind of justifies the perk. So I think what we have to be really clear with as well when we talk about these perks is that you only have 3. So when you weigh up all of the other perks, it's very hard sometimes to justify these more niche ones. And it's like, yeah, you could do it for fun or you could do it for a bit of a challenge, but in reality, it's like, how useful is that perk? So yeah, that's going to be my overall tier list. Again, I am going to continue playing. I plan on doing a full mutations run on both the desert map and the ice map. Once I've done those, I may revisit this tier list if it changes a lot. This is obviously a early access game, so all of this stuff is subject to change, and I know they're going to be bringing an update soon. So again, all of this could just become completely redundant tomorrow, but I thought it'd be really fun just to talk about the perks and my thoughts and feelings and stuff on them. I hope you really enjoyed this video. If your tier list would be different, or you think that other perks that maybe I've listed too low or too high are actually really beneficial, then share your story, let us know. It's always good to talk about these things. And if the developer does see this video, I think it really help with them to kind of get an opinion from other players and, you know, their thoughts, and I think it helps with feedback and stuff. So look, you know, don't just look at this as, oh, I'm bashing bad perks and promoting really good perks. That's not really the idea here. It's a case of just talking about my thoughts and feelings on perks as a whole. You know, you're allowed to have positive comments and, you know, not necessarily negative comments, but, you know, I've tried to give constructive feedback on some of the perks that I wasn't as big of a fan of, or try and call out their nicheness. And, you know, let's try and promote where we think things could be better. Now, you're not ever going to have everything cool in S tier, right? You know, some perks are going to just naturally be not as good as others, and that's just the way it will be. But, you know, we can always give always give our thoughts and feelings on some perks that we think need a leg up, and I definitely think the perks that are in either D or C could do with a bit of TLC, and then everything from B onwards I think serves a good purpose and what it's trying to achieve. But that's it from me, guys. Again, as I say, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next one. Thanks, peace.